like you said, he's got 3 rings, right? And just to clarify, none of those rings are with Toronto, right?
Is Fraser Minton going to have more points than Slafkovsky this year? Fraser Minton sucks at hockey. This guy might not even be an NHLer, so we got to settle down on that one.
Adelaide, no. Minus 160 on will they show her holding a drink in her hand.
They are 2 points behind the St. Louis Blues in the wild card, and they are.
Oh, the Blues are dog water. The Blues suck. The Blues are the worst of those 4 teams that I mentioned by a mile.
And
they're not a good hockey team.
Care, like have some set of balls, have some response, have some pride for what the hell goes on the ice. It's so absurd.
I'm looking forward to the parade, but that's going to be later in the year.
I'd rather have so money in that than have Alber Soderblom. I would rather stack a bunch of garbage that I have in the corner of my room over here than have Alber Soderblom in that. He's
May 17th, welcome back to Edgework, presented by Pinnacle. I'm Zack Phillips, joined here this morning by Alex B. Smith, Matt Alber. We'll be breaking down the games that took place last night. We'll look ahead to the games on tonight's NHL schedule, as well as give out best bets, answer questions from the chat as well. But before we can get into any of that, I want to remind people that today's show, as always, is sponsored by Pinnacle Sportsbook. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sportsbook, in business for 25 years. You can find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. You must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly, and remember, not available to bettors in the U.S. As we go through the games here today, if we bring up series prices, anything like that, you're going to notice a lot of the time Pinnacle is going to have the best odds, whether it's sides, totals, first periods, puck lines, it doesn't matter. Pinnacle is going to have the best odds on those more times than not, so make sure to head on over to Pinnacle Sportsbook and sign up there. Let's take a look at last night's games. We'll start there, and before we get into tonight's action and give out our best bets, and let's start with the man who was boots on the ground last night, Alber. You were in attendance for Game 6. We talked about over the last little while how if you were on the Rangers, if you were a Rangers fan, if you were a Rangers bettor, after the last couple of games, you were probably having some clenched butt cheeks based on what was going on. Yet last night, the Rangers able to get it done and advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. A 5-3 victory over the Carolina Hurricanes. How are we feeling this morning?
Couldn't really be much better, honestly. And there were certainly a lot of clenched butt cheeks, even like after the second period. They looked like crap. Early in the third period, like it looked over. They looked completely dead. That building was just going ballistic. It's so loud in there. Rangers looked awful. Canes were coming hard. And then, as the Canes do year after year, they let in a real softie by Anderson. That goal that made it 3-2. And then it just kind of went all downhill from there. And they just couldn't find a way to keep Kreider away from the front of the net. And just, I still can't believe it, frankly. Like, what an insane turnaround, because they looked completely dead in the water a few minutes into the third. And it looked like we were going to be headed for a Game 7, which, man, I'm so glad we don't have to deal with a Game 7 after being up 3-0 at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still kind of like at a loss for how that'll happen, because it certainly did not feel like that was possible. Like they looked completely dead. I don't know. Apparently you still can't believe it with the cause chaos in your tagline. Like the Canes were still sending me like ticket alerts at like 1 a.m. for tickets for next round. I'm like, not going to need those anymore.
Nice.
No, it was great. Vibes are very, very high today.
Alex, you watched that series wrap up last night. Any big takeaways from what you saw out of the Rangers, the way that they played through those 6 games, their ability to get it done there yesterday?
Yeah, well, I mean, the playoffs are all about, resiliency. And what we saw from Igor Shesterkin, from where he looked in the second period to where I posed the question and was watching, we did a watch along with the Ice Guys yesterday. I said, maybe you pull Shesterkin and you put Jonathan Quick in the third period to kind of, get momentum rolling. That was not necessary. He was fired up and ready, and he made some big saves in that third period. And that's what led to the Rangers being able to tie that game up and eventually take the lead and go ahead and win that game. So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, was that Shesterkin being able to just kind of weather the storm in a game and then make big saves when needed. And, of course, like I said, when you're relying on guys like Chris Kreider and company, those veterans that have, get those gritty and dirty goals at times when you need it. Those are the things you need to advance in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that's the reason why the Rangers are now moving on to the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, finding ways to get it done. 8 down now, 8 to go, Alber. Yeah, you got to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. And like as far as the actual kind of game context, all that kind of goes, like the only adjustment it really seemed like the Rangers made, especially early in the game, is that they were far more aggressive, pinching their D up, kind of saying like, "Hey, we'll trade small man rushes with you," and kind of assume that guys like Kreider's, Zibanejad, Panarin, et cetera, would be able to kind of capitalize on those. And it didn't really work. Like they'd certainly kind of had some good chances early, but they gave the Canes, I think it was like 3 2-on-1s in the first half of the game. That was clearly an adjustment. They realized like, hey, we can kind of lean on the back of Igor. And it obviously didn't really work because all their goals were scored from what, like 4 feet away from the net outside of the Panarin shot that got deflected. So man, I don't know. Like it's just where do you go from here if you're Carolina? Honestly, though, like this, I think we'd all agree this is probably the best, most complete team that they've had, certainly in the last 4 or 5 years. They went out and they needed a goal scorer. They got Gensel, who had a good series. Like Nate just had a pretty good series. Scored again last night. Aho scored last night. Svechnikov had a big goal in game two. Like you've got pretty big goals from some of your top contributors. It's like I don't know where you go from here if you're Carolina, but for the Rangers, like again, kind of touched on it all year. Like even when they don't play their best game, which they certainly didn't last night, they just match up so well with a team like this, where like you kind of could feel them coming on in the second before Carolina made it 3-1. They made it 3-1, which really sucked, and then like right after they got that second goal, they just kept the foot on the gas, and Carolina just never really seemed to get much momentum back. And obviously, you kind of needed a few big Igor saves at the end. Like I think he stopped Aho on a breakaway. I'm pretty sure he stopped Jarvis on one in close. Like I know he had that save right on the slot on Svechnikov right after they took the lead. Man, talked about it all year. Why I like this matchup. I'm just grateful for whoever keeps causing the Canes to be like minus 150 at home in these games because it just makes absolutely no sense to me all year. I don't know. We'll take it. We'll move on, and we'll see what happens from here. I definitely don't feel the same way about potentially playing Florida that I do Carolina. I think.
Oh, no, you don't?
No, the I mean, the problem is the areas where you see the matchup with Carolina being exploitable. Their goaltending is not very good. Well, Florida has Sergei Bobrovsky, who can steal the series on his own. Like,
yeah,
Carolina doesn't have a ton of high-end scoring talent. Well, the Panthers have Reinhart, Kachuk, Verhaeghe. I know I'm missing another guy or two in there as I think about it. So it's like that matchup edge isn't really there. And 5-on-5, they're going to control the play in a similar way that Carolina does. So I don't know. It'll be a hell of a lot tougher, I think, than Carolina was. But for now, we'll see who it is.
The other series that took place there last night, the Vancouver Canucks jumping out to a 3-2 series lead over the Edmonton Oilers. Game 5 in Vancouver last night and taking that one. So Money probably not here this morning because he's still looking for his pants outside on the streets in Vancouver. Alex B., what are your thoughts on the Canucks taking that lead? The Oilers falling behind here? Are they fraudulent? Just what do you make of the series in general and the Canucks able to get that one done last night with a 3-2 victory?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's a fraudulent look from the Oilers, although this is something we've seen from them time and time again, right? Where it looks like they have an edge in a series, they have some momentum gained, and all of a sudden they end up losing a game, they end up losing 2 games, and they're out of the postseason. But I give credit all to Vancouver in this one, especially JT Miller, a guy who, texted Rick Tocchet saying, hey, I didn't play my best in the last game. Really sorry about that. Tocchet called out a lot of the guys saying that, some of these guys, playing as if they don't realize they're in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And that team, fought back and they were able to get the tying goal in the second period, but still be able to wear down and play their game and possess the puck for the majority of the time in the third. And then JT Miller bearing it, the game winner late. Those are the kind of wins you need in the playoffs and be able to, grind out those games when things are neck and neck, when this is a completely even series. So for Vancouver to now put that pressure on the Oilers, and now the Oilers have the doubt in their mind of, oh, here we go again, another chance and moving forward, and now we're going to blow a series potentially. and you think, oh, being back at home for the next game would kind of help. I think that might actually be a deterrent for them because Vancouver goes up 1-0 in Game 6. That crowd's going to turn on this Oilers bunch pretty fast, and you might end up starting to hear boos if they aren't playing to a high enough level in an elimination style game. So I think Vancouver has now put all the pressure on Edmonton. They can kind of play and breathe a little easier, and they're 1 win away from the Western Conference Final.
I think that that's a fair point. As you watch that team, it's going to be a tense building. You're down in the series here now. It is only the second round. You're going to feel some of that pressure if things don't go well for you to start the game off. It could go the opposite way very quickly. Alber, I feel like it's safe to assume last night between the Rangers game and the celebrations, you didn't catch much of the Canucks game.
Yeah, that would be correct. I literally walked in, turned the TV on as JT Miller scored the go-ahead goal late in the game. Was looking a little forward to overtime. Also had some Canucks live bets that I placed in the car on the way back, so was kind of happy just to cash those. But I don't think the Canucks winning that game last night was really much of a surprise. I think we talked about okay, the Oilers, they're so top heavy that when they're not getting this, it's kind of like Colorado, that when their top players can take over, they can take over the series like they did. I think it was Game 2. When they don't, the Canucks are probably the deeper team. And especially where now the Oilers are on Calvin Pickard, he's just, I think it was Moretto that touched on this the other day. They kind of backed themselves into a corner with having to play Pickard. And it's certainly not like he played badly last night, but I don't think you're winning a cup or maybe going to the final even with him. And to my kind of thoughts, these teams with all this top end talent, like the Oilers, like the Avalanche is another one that aren't very deep. I just think they're consistently overvalued. So it's I've been on the Canucks a little bit throughout the series. If you're the Oilers, though, you can't be feeling very good going into Game 6. Even if you are able to get it done, it has kind of a very similar feel to their series against Vegas last year. And I'm not saying Vancouver is Vegas, but it just kind of had that feel going in, it never really felt like the series was in doubt. And all of a sudden now you look at it and you look up and you're down 3-2 coming back home. And now you got to win both.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how it's going to go. I certainly would not be running to lay Oilers minus 215 or whatever it is in Game 6. But I don't know. It should be an interesting one.
Well, last night was a pretty good night for yourself there, Alber, getting that win. It was a pretty good night for So Money getting the Canucks win, and it was a pretty good night for the Edgework team. We had 5 bets yesterday. We go 4-1. We win Evander Kane under 2.5 shots on goal. We get the JT Miller anytime goal. We get the under 6.5 in that Oilers Canucks game, as well as we get the Rangers money line at plus 140 there. The one bet that loses is the under 5.5 in the Rangers Canes game, but you know what? It is what it is. If you have 5 bets, we go 4-1 on the night. We'll take it. We'll take the one loss. As for tonight's games, let's get into those. There are 2 for us to be breaking down here, and we'll start first and foremost in Boston, where the Bruins are hosting the Panthers. We got the Bruins plus 130 right now. The Panthers minus 140, best price available on the other side. Total of 5.5 right across the board right now, and you're finding plus money to the over on that 5.5. Alex, what are your thoughts on this game here tonight? The Panthers, another opportunity here again to close this series out, and where we're seeing the number right now for tonight's game.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously this is huge for Florida. You have to be able to, like I said, shoulder the resiliency and be able to finally put away a team that you were able to come back and beat last year, and now being a better team than them this year, you have to find a way to slay the dragon again. And it seemed like Boston had all the momentum kind of on their side early in that game. Florida kind of maybe also kind of just taking things for granted early and just never being able to really come back and get their game going. But they have to start with the pace in their favor early. So the way I would look at this with Florida would be first period. I would definitely be looking at first period puck line. I'm seeing half a goal around plus 160 to plus 175 if you shop around. I think that's got to be the big key for them is to score early, get out of that first period with a lead, let take the air out of that crowd at TD Garden and let some doubt creep into the minds of the Bruins as they head back into the locker room. I think that's the way you have to kind of slow beat this team, and if you can get that first period win, that should be able to kind of give you the momentum you need to take care of business and wrap the series up.
So we want to go first period puck line here. The minus 0.5 plus 178, Alex.
Yes, it's full unit.
All right. There we go. Full unit play. First bet of the night. Panthers. First period puck line minus 0.5 plus 178. That is the first bet of the day that we'll lock in. Alber, as for your thoughts on tonight's game with this Panthers team, another opportunity here again tonight to close this out. How are you approaching this one?
So I don't have anything right now. I think it's tough to do much until you know if Marchand's going to play or not, honestly. If he's in, I certainly am going to try to get on the Bruins here. Like, I'm not one for angles, and I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here. But I think one of them that I do generally kind of like to play is the team who hasn't won a home game yet in the series as it gets late. I think you generally see, like, especially over the last couple of years, that it does tend to come through. I know Toronto kind of won in that situation in the first round. That said, that's kind of very narrative-y, but I think it is a pretty fair price. I do think you see a pretty good effort from the Bruins here tonight, especially if Marchand is able to come back. So that's kind of the way I would look there. Not much on the total. I lean under. I'll save it for the later game. But no, I do lean under here as well, but I have not played anything yet.
All right. Let's get to the later game. Let's get to the other one here. We've got the Avalanche hosting the Dallas Stars in Game 6 of that series. We've talked about over and over again about the fact that this Stars team just hates getting series done early. They opportunities to get it done in 5, opportunities to get it done in 6. They just want to push it to 7. They want to keep things alive. Well, Game 6 here tonight for this Dallas Stars team, another opportunity for them to close it out, maybe get a little extra rest. But so far here, we're seeing the Colorado Avalanche minus 113, best price available. We see the Stars plus 102. Kind of varying totals here. We see 6s, we see 6.5s. Alber, what are your thoughts on this game? Do you have any bets for us here in this one?
So I don't have anything on this game specifically. Kind of getting to it, I lean under again, and I know I touched on this before the playoffs. Kind of when I like both unders on a given night on a 2-game slate, I'll just play the salami. I do tend to do that a little bit, so I did that tonight. I'm on the under 11.5 at plus money. I think Rob kind of touched on a lot of this the other day with this series. Like, as this series goes more 5-on-5, and this obviously didn't play on Game 5, you had a lot of power plays. But as the series goes later, you should see fewer penalties. Like last night, I think that game had 2 penalties the whole game in it. Rangers-Canes game, like Game 5 had 3 power play goals. You can get that down. Like that's the difference between it going over and under right there. So that's the way I would certainly look. I think you can get, Zach, if you could pull that back up. I think under 6 is plus money.
Yeah, I'm pulling up.
But yeah, that's certainly the way I would kind of lean here. As far as the side, I think it's kind of right in line. Like, or I think it was Game 3. You could have Dallas around plus 115 or so. I think this has kind of been bet down into place. I know a lot of us are sitting on Stars series and Stars futures, so kind of hope this one ends tonight. But I think my favorite look here on both games would be the unders.
Do you want to lock this in as an official bet here in this Av Stars game?
Can we lock in a salami on the show?
We cannot. No, we can't.
All right, let's do it for a half unit here because I like this one a little bit better than the Bruins one. So yeah,
Okay.
do a half unit on that.
So we'll go the under 6 plus 104, and we'll go a half unit on this for our second best bet of the day. Alex, do you have another best bet to add to today's portfolio?
I don't in regards to this game. I mean, obviously, if you like the under, by all means, lay the $1.20 and get 6.5 if possible, because that's just a little bit of extra security, especially when you're talking about an elimination game where we tend to see this with these empty net goals late in the third period, and that's kind of something that an angle I like to look for in game. Third period over, looking for a 1.5, laying a cheaper price in that department. We saw it cash and come through with the empty net goal with the Rangers last night. So that's the one thing that would have me cause for some concern looking at any kind of under in this particular game, knowing how these two offenses can be. Yes, the trend of when a series goes later, you look toward unders. But I just kind of feel like this game could get out of hand, especially if it's Dallas leading heading into the third period.
All right. Well, that'll do it for today's show. We break down last night's games, break down tonight's games. We appreciate everyone in the chat. Actually, quickly before we go, Charles here did mention earlier on in the show, which I want to get to specifically. Albert, get your thoughts on it before we head into the weekend. Charles asking or saying Kreider's Conn Smythe 90-1 is insane. No, what are your thoughts on that pricing there, where that market's currently sitting at, and if that's a bet that you'd get involved in here, Albert?
So I think it's probably worth something small. The problem I have with that is, okay, so first of all, you need the Rangers to win the cup. They're going to be dogs in both series. I haven't looked at the cup odds this morning. My guess is there's something around like 4-1 ish. But if they were to win, you kind of look at how it's probably going to happen. Obviously, the favorite for the Rangers is going to be Shesterkin. I don't think it's going to be that close. After that, it's probably going to be Panarin. And you're still going to have somebody like Trocheck up there, who's been arguably the Rangers' second best forward during the playoffs. It's like, yeah, 90-1 is probably worth a stab. But it's certainly a long shot still. Like, he's probably still, like, even if you told me they were going to win the cup, he's probably still like third favorite to win it. And you would need more of these games. Like, obviously last night was great, but it's not like he's been like terrific the whole playoff so far. That said, we did talk about it yesterday, kind of with the whole Wyatt Johnston thing, with kind of the comparison to Marchessault. Like, you can be pretty bad in the first 2 rounds or do very little and still like win the Conn Smythe if you have a big last 2 rounds. And it certainly kind of will play more to his style as the playoffs go deeper. So I do think it's worth a flyer, yeah, but I don't think it's like a bagger or anything like that.
All right, Alex, any thoughts from you on this market and where we're currently seeing the numbers sitting at?
Yeah, I mean, if I were looking to bet, say, someone for the Rangers to win the Conn Smythe as a form of betting the Rangers to win the Cup, I would go Igor Shesterkin. But if you wanted to take a flyer or a long shot, I think Kreider wouldn't be something terrible to have in pocket for a smaller bet.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. We appreciate everyone who tuned in here. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe here to the channel. Thank you so much to everyone who has watched here, who has supported, who has continued to follow along with us throughout the playoffs, getting things back on the right track here after a tough end to the season following the All-Star break. But thank you to everyone who's supported. Make sure to hit that like button if you're watching on podcast or listening on podcast. Subscribe, rate, review. Thank you so much for the support. Our 2 bets for tonight's games, you can find them over in the BetSamp app in the Find Better section as Edgework HQ. We got 2 bets. The first one, we're going to take the Panthers first period puck line minus 0.5 plus 178 against the Bruins here tonight for a full unit there. And then for a half unit in the second game, we're going to look at the Stars Avalanche under 6 plus 104. Those are our best bets. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. We appreciate it. Alex, Matt, thank you guys for taking the time to do this as always. We appreciate the support, the insight, all of that. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Enjoy the games tonight. Enjoy the games this weekend. And good luck on your bets.